So how many of you are using RAG embeddings or thinking of using RAG embeddings? Okay, quite a few. How many of you using RAG embeddings know what you need to do with regards to personally identifiable information when you're creating those embeddings? Okay, one person, sort of. All right, that is very concerning, but hopefully I can then give you a little bit of a toolkit to think about when you're dealing with PII within your infrastructure. And very similar to PII, you might want to think about this for confidential company information as well as you're creating these embeddings. So with regards to privacy and RAG embeddings, when it comes to data protection regulations and what the requirements are around personally identifiable information, it tends to be for both direct identifiers and quasi-identifiers. Most people, when they think of PII, it tends to be around direct identifiers, entire names, entire addresses, credit card numbers, but it's actually beyond that. It could be information like religion, like political affiliation, like physical attributes. So you don't always need to account for quasi-identifiers, but it's very much something that you need to consider if you're trying to anonymize your data in order to fall outside of the GDPR, or when you're thinking about risk of re-identification, or when you're thinking about sensitive information processing. Under certain legislations, you cannot process sensitive data like sexual orientation and political affiliation. And when you get quasi-identifiers, you can actually combine them to re-identify an individual, and the more quasi-identifiers you have, the exponential the increase of re-identification risk. So again, minimization is a core requirement for data protection regulations. Anonymization isn't always, but it might be something that's useful for you to think about, and for you to think about with regards to risk. And the reason it's really important to think about personally identifiable information, not just within RAG embeddings, but also within the training data and fine-tuning data that you're creating, is because that data can be spewed out in production. You're also sending sometimes that data to third parties, or you might be sharing that data with team members that don't necessarily have the original access controls required. But one of the main concerns is when you're fine-tuning or using RAG embeddings, that PII can then be output in production. This is an example of ScatterLab, a company in Korea who had been boasting about the billions of conversations they had between users, and trained their models with those conversations, and out came the personal information of the users in production in other chats. Names, home addresses, and so on in responses. With regards to embeddings, what I'll recommend you have a look at are papers that actually show how much information really is stored in embeddings. In this case, this paper by Abdallah et al., they showcased how you can retrieve which names are closer to which last names within a variety of embeddings that are trained on and generated from healthcare data, and also which names are closer to which disease. So you could figure out which person was associated to which disease based on the embedding. And here is a more recent paper by Morris et al. And excuse me. And it's showing how even a dense embedding you can retrieve up to 92% of the original information. And in this case, they showed how even full names can be retrieved from a data set of clinical notes that was used to create these embeddings. So that's not only the case for personal identifiable information, but also the confidential information that you're dealing with within your company. So before you even deal with creating embeddings, you need to understand what the risk is with the contextual data that you're generating, or that you're using to generate them. There are many places where you have to think about privacy in large language models. One of them is when sending data to third parties, with whether or not the data that you're sending for training, fine-tuning, for creating the embeddings or the prompts contain PII or confidential information. Another is with regards to sanitizing the prompts, even when they are going to an internal large language model, because your customers might be sending information through that you don't want on your servers, things like credit card numbers, healthcare data, so things that you want to be cautious of. You will also want to clean your data from fine-tuning and training in order to prevent that memorization of personal information. Same with contextual data being used to generate embeddings. And as a measure of last resort, you can also block personal information and confidential information from leaving your organization in the response. So you could add an extra layer of detection there. What you're going to want to look for in a de-identification solution, given the large amounts of data that you might be dealing with in your organization, are things that are highly accurate, scalable, customizable, something that's also relevant to multiple languages around the world and that is multinationally adapted. You might also be dealing with text, audio, images, documents. Those documents might be pretty complex, as we'll see in a slide. And you'll also want a solution that's constantly keeping track of data protection regulations globally. When it comes to complex documents, this is an example of how tricky it can be. So you might have tables, you might have images embedded in your documents. There are multiple types of files that you have to account for when you are trying to unlock that 80 to 90% of the data that's within your organization, which is unstructured. And furthermore, it is really tricky to know whether the solution you are dealing with is of high quality right off the bat. So here are a couple of ways to tell if there's third-party verification that has assessed the models. And there are two ways to get third-party verification, one for the models, one for the data. And hopefully this becomes actually much more common in the future. In this case, this is a model assessment that we did at Private AI, which is backed by Swiss Re with a warranty, and it tests performance, bias and fairness, robustness, and process and governance. And in this case, this is one of our partners that we work with in order to get HIPAA expert determination on particular data sets. And while it is not very common to do expert determination, which is a stamp of approval of a re-identification risk being low and under a threshold, in the United States, for HIPAA compliance for healthcare, it is very common, and it would be something that would be really great to see move over to Europe for the GDPR. So what we offer is a very scalable de-identification solution. It's been deployed globally for many years now. Some of the biggest companies in the world use us as a privacy layer for their generative AI. So I recommend you take a look if you are going to be working on embeddings or training or fine-tuning models. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. We have 2 minutes for questions from the audience. Maybe you might want to stay. I will pass along the microphone if anyone has a question. If there's a question, the microphone is coming your way. I think it should work.
I think it's on. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. What's your recommendation for local data sanitization? Since you're already providing an API, what would you say would be the first steps for trying this out locally?
Sorry, there's such an echo that I have no idea what you said. What's the recommendation for what?
What is your recommendation for local data sanitization if I don't want to start with an API right away?
Oh, local data sanitization. So our solution deploys directly in your environment if that's something that you'd like to do. So that is what I'd recommend, because we do have the best solution in the world, and I don't say that lightly.
All right. Any more questions? There's one more question over here. Yep.
Thank you very much. One question. How do you see multiple different languages impacting privacy analysis? Do you think it has to be language specific, or can we approach many different languages with the same tools and techniques?
Many different what, sorry?
Languages, like natural languages. Can you defend the same problem in French as in Chinese or in Spanish?
Yes. So we deploy for 53 different languages, and we work within Japan, Hong Kong, Australia, many European countries, supporting most of the major European languages, and a lot of North America as well. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. If there are any other questions, you can perfectly approach Patricia after the sessions. And yeah, give her a warm applause, please.